And one of the things that sort of made us, because we sort of used LightWave back in LightWave 7 in our studio at Massive Entertainment, and then or LightWave 8, it was LightWave 8, and then there was this wait going on and nothing happened, and so we switched to Maya, right? Maya
Yeah.
Mental Ray. And then after some years with that, all the Maya people sort of left the studio. So we were like, oh shit, what are we going to do? And then I was sort of trying out LightWave 9, I think it was in beta. And so then I started looking at that. And then all of a sudden, Lerny Ang developed a render pass management system called Janus or something like
Mm.
that. And that was the key thing for us to then actually take the step to say, hey, let's do all the animation in whatever package we want to use. Let's MD. We used Point Oven back then to actually do MDDs. This is before Maya
Yeah,
had, Geocache or Alembic, and we used Point Oven to output MDDs, and then we could sort of assemble everything in Lightwave in a big master system or a master scene. And then from that master scene, we used Janus to actually break out render layers to then render on the render farm. So render layering is one of those things that I'm super, super interested in, because you don't want to re-render stuff that doesn't need to be re-rendered, right? If you have a background that is approved, why re-render that if you can, render that as a separate layer? Things like that. So yeah, a render layering system would be super, super nice to see at some point. It's just that's my wish list for Lightwave, at least, moving
yeah.
forward.
So there's two styles of rendering
Yeah,
that people get into. You either try to render all in one pass, a complete as possible out of that one pass, or you render in layers, right, and output as many layers as you possibly can. So um, from a production point of view, from a company point of view, it is much better to have layers and as many layers and as much control over that as possible. And that needs to be as simple and as rock solid as it can possibly be. So I mentioned, obviously, when we were talking before the interview about, Simon was the first person who, or actually, he wasn't the first member of staff, but he was about fourth, but he was the first person who came in. He was just amazing talent for how to put together scenes, etc., etc. And Simon, for years, his biggest bugbear with Lightwave was the inability for outputting layers and getting out each component part correctly and easily. And even when that was fixed, it's still not quite as good as it needs to actually be to make that work. So it is essential that is fixed and sorted as we go forward. But again, that is a time thing. But it is very, very important. But likewise, you want to better have the cook it all in one oven approach as well, which is much more how young animators or smaller companies will work. Generally, because of time, they'll just try to pump out as much in shot as you possibly can and get it out. I tend to be a bit of a Luddite in that I pride myself in trying to make scenes look as nice as possible in shot. But the reality of it is, it isn't the way to do it on if you want to have the ability to adjust the shading on a specific layer at a specific moment in a shot, you've got to output everything in layers and then composite it. And compositing has to be the major part of the art. And by the way, the compositing in Lightwave, and we've had 3 layers forever, but again, that should be a little bit better. Why haven't you got 10 layers? But whatever. You should have. Some, even if it's not meant to be as good as a top end compositor, we could have links direct to, let's say, Blackmagic, their software,
Fusion.
both for timeline and DaVinci, but Fusion. You could have. I'm sure if we spoke to them, because they're a lovely bunch of guys, and very much like NewTek was, and I'm sure if we spoke to them, they'd help us and want us to make some solid links, because I think we could do some stunning stuff by having a direct link into a major compositor. And I think Fusion, so obviously I remember Fusion from way back
Yeah.
when the squares. Do you remember the blocks with the original Fusion? And and it was fantastic to use then. It's fantastic to use now. I don't know where it sits on the world stage of compositors, but it's awesomely powerful. And I know that we use it at Quantum for compositing, and it's just had some major tools for tracking and changing the light position on objects and all kinds of things added. So if we could link with that and take over, make multiple layers, objects, everything into Fusion, and even sync with their timeline, so you could drop, see, you could drop renders in and out of a timeline, those sort of things. There's got to be things there we can do that would be both good for their users, but also exceptionally good for our users. Anyway, that's a quick thought. Yeah, so I think there's a stack of things we need to do on the layer side of LightWave, and to sort of sort out the problems with it and repair it and get them to be even better. Anyway, yeah. So I didn't mean to digress into compositing, but
The thing is that, when we use CPU-based rendering, both in, Mental Ray in Maya and also Lightwave, thanks
yeah,
to Janus, we always did a lot of like render passes, which were like background layer, midground layer, characters by themselves, and so on and so
yeah,
forth. But now with the GPU stuff, since it's so darn fast, I've seen sort of like a tendency that let's just do it in one, everything in one shot, and then output like a cryptomat or similar to that, then just tweak some stuff in compositing. So yeah, I see I see the benefit of doing it the both ways, but with CPUs, certainly nowadays, if you want to be competitive, I think you need to think about the render layering approach.
I
yeah.
mean, I definitely think it should be something that we should have integral into Lightwave. And I've long argued for having an internal compositor, but
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's kind of again on the list of what you need to get done. It's where does
big
it fit?
list.
But it is
It's a big list.
Yeah.
so. I suppose fundamentally that on the upgrades of what things we do when and so on. First thing, and again, I think I said this on the very first time I was on with the group. There should be no limit to what we want to do to Lightwave long term. So if we want to have, so we can do basic terrain stuff and mold terrain in Lightwave currently, and we'll be able to do that better in a few months, hopefully. And yeah, so basically all of those sort of things are good. But wouldn't it be great if we had proper terrain generators, tree growers, plant generators, or have some kind of link with, we can, why not more strategic partnerships even? So if we can't get the partnerships, we need to do it ourselves. So for instance, we could partner with the guys at is it Vu, Esprit, the Eon software.
Oh, yeah.
So we might be able to chat with them. Again, really nice guys. I don't know if the same guys are there, but we could certainly try to have a chat with them. We had a very successful link that I actually instigated, but Frank Lafarge did, whereby we integrated or had a version of their software bundled with Lightwave. Do you remember Eon software? And that one has kind of also plateaued. I always think that it hasn't got faster. It's still, quite difficult to do certain things, but there are certain bits of their program where we could maybe either we need to do our own version of that to create our own terrain generators, but really good terrain generators and shaders for that. I would love to be able to do our own trees and plants and those sort of things as well. I mean, there are so many things there which add a complication, but ultimately, again, if we could make a Lightwave that was modular long term, and you had, the basic Lightwave has everything in it you need to do really good stuff. But if you want to do super advanced animation, you could upgrade that to being, an add-on module that does, AI character animation or whatever, I don't know, something like a massive sort of add-on. Yeah, and likewise, if you had terrain generators and basic, whatever generators for plants, whatever, grass, whatever, and then you add a module on that is a specific tree builder or whatever. It would be great if we could make LightWave grow that way. I think that we give as much as we possibly can away as standard, but have it so that if an animator gets it, he can do character animation, scene setting, things like wheels moving around on your truck automatically. There should be floor planes. There should be all those things we need to have built in and make it as easy for an animator to almost be able to do the whole job on his own if he needed to. That's what LightWave was always about originally. It was making it so that a single animator could compete against a VTR, right? Or the VTR don't any longer exist, but you could take and do the work that normally would have to be done by 3 or 4 different pieces of software and 3 or 4 different animators in one piece of software. That is what we very much want to try to do, and so hence again that went back down to the layout and the modeler thing. Obviously, modeler, the hub, you get the idea. I think the layout has to be the perfect. We want it to be the best animation interface long term you can possibly have, and that you can do all the modeling things you really need in animation to do. So you're not going to want to construct an engine in layout and model as you animate it. You don't. You basically model it in the perfect modeling interface, construct it in its layers, and again, the layer system in LightWave, by the way, very overlooked. But if you have, I'm not sure it's unlimited, but it's always felt pretty unlimited to me, the amount of layers in there. But if you can have 60, 70, 80, 100 layers on an object, and then bring that in and have your engine explode into 100 parts, and it's mind-bendingly easy to do that and simple to construct that, and I love that. And that's again another thing I've always loved, the layers in sort of the modeler. Again, I think that could be enhanced. Maybe there's other ways of having those easier to select. Maybe there's ways of having those easier to group, so that you can just click on maybe a little sub menu where you've grouped things and can call up group 2, group 3, group whatever as your background layers. There's things there. Maybe we can enhance that as well. But it's far from replace it. It's how would you if you have to get that all into layout as well? You're talking about an unlimited layering system. Now in Maya, that's a long menu where you have to click on those items and call them up and highlight them and so on. Takes up a lot of screen real estate. I'd much rather have that in the layout. That said, the scene editor and the scene parts in LightWave currently, having 3 variations of scene editor, let's just make one great one, right? So
yeah, that needs updating and replacing, doesn't it? And promise me, Andy, we won't just have scene editor 4. That doesn't quite replace the other 2, so you have to kind of just leave them around just in case. Because it happens, doesn't it? This is the problem.
The backward compatibility problem, isn't it? So one of the things we've got to make a choice of going forward is backward compatibility. Do you just stop? Now the trouble is 2015 and after is that argument. It's where you go, well, actually we need to improve the render engine. Do we try to make it backward compatible or not? Now when you don't make it backward compatible, you just screwed a huge portion of the LightWave market, and you ended up, they've never moved on, right? And there's 20,000 users who do animate. So was that the right decision? Then I don't know. But likewise, going forward,
it's hard to say, because when they originally set out to do 2018, it's very clear that they had an objective to try and create a really good anime system within 2018. It's just the problem is it isn't, and that's that. It didn't get properly finished. It wasn't able to replace what they'd done in 2015. So therefore, there was no reason to jump. If they had completed that or finished it or maybe tweaked it to make it better than it was, because I think it's a bit of a weird interface. I'm not a fan. And they just went, right, we've now got a perfected version of an anime style of rendering. A lot of that you could even do real time. So in the viewport, if you improved the OpenGL performance,
Yeah, I agree.
or replaced it entirely with, whatever it is that they're going to replace it with. And then they would go, well, obviously we'll want to use the next version of LightWave because it's just better. But currently that's not the case for them, and that's why they haven't jumped.
Yeah, and also there's a lot of custom tools they use,
Yes.
which stopped working, right? So I think we've got to look at that, and if we can longer term, we need to remedy that in the obviously 2020 plus, right? So but that's going to take a while to do. I think the first part of the reason I'm thinking about the 2015 route with Elmar and the guys at the moment is because we have, it's not that difficult to add a lot of the stuff we're doing in the current version of LightWave into 2015. It just happens to be very difficult taking the stuff that's great in 2015 and getting it into 2020. So maybe what we need to do is upgrade that for a path until we can remedy that, and then we'll try to remedy that and sort that out. But we don't want to leave them on their own. I mean, it's a big part of it. They produce beautiful work. Well, why not? Why can't they have some of the tools we're now producing? Let's try to make that happen. So again, I think NewTek had one of the problems was, is you've got to be willing to make mistakes when you do this stuff, right? I think if you're taking this on, you've got to be honest with everybody. And if you make a screw up, you just say, I have screwed up, right? If someone wants to kill you for that, well, that's their problem. But the reality of it is, we're human beings. No one's in this to screw this up. We're all in this to make this better. And I'm talking everybody from beta testers, people who are advising and helping us now, right the way through to the programmers, whatever. I had a guy absolutely busting my chops the other day because we'd taken on some of the programmers and the guys from the past, and he blames them for everything, including the ills of America in general, I think. And I suppose there's several things to remember. When you have a programming team, that programming team are run by the people who own or are directing that project, right? They don't randomly get up and do a bit of programming on their own. They are directed to do, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, you need to do that, right? And you tell them what to do. And if you get that wrong, then they get the blame. How's that right? Actually, it's me who made the choice. It isn't them. How is it a programmer is suddenly, a dreadful guy because basically I chose to make him do X that turned out to be a complete load of crap, right? Well, that's my fault. Now, there is an element that sometimes the programmer gets it wrong and doesn't quite do it well enough, and bang, right? Of course, but it is it's a team sport. We're not in the business of one person. It's totally their fault. So my job is, as a passionate LightWave user, like you, Andrew, like both of you, is to come up with ideas I think animators want long term, and a path that drives that forward to make that be deliverable. It is Elmer's job to also do the same thing, but also make sure that the best interface is done for those. And that's what gives him sleepless nights, by the way, is that he's thinking, oh God, wouldn't it be good if it had this? Oh, if we had a bit more money, we could do this. His job is to bust my chops and Joe's chops to get the resources to enable him to do what he wants to do, right? And sometimes, that's going to be, we can't yet afford it. Sometimes that's going to be, okay, we'll back down and give you the extra £25 for that. It's it's that kind of stuff, right? So but when people look at LightWave and they blame the whole team for what's happened, it's mad. The people who ran LightWave then made mistakes that we all pay the price of, including the programmers, by the way. It is not the programmers who caused those problems. Some of those programmers are super talented. It's just that they didn't have the direction, and decisions were made that were wrong. So, on the render engine, if you have two guys working on the render engine and one is making shitloads of mistakes, but one is doing great stuff, all that everybody remembers is the shit stuff. So the guy who did all the good stuff, right, is vilified. Why? It's because they don't know what happened, right? And that's why, you know, why am I working with a lot of the programmers? Because actually I believe they're really good and really good. And the sooner I could get more of them back, the better. You know, it was the management that let them down, not them who let the management down. That's that. And then one other thing on the defense of some of the other people. Some of the support staff also get a real kicking from people for, you know, they were rude to me once, or they, you know, didn't tell me accurately this or whatever.
Yeah.
So when you work for a company and you're paid for, you know, to your food, your car, everything basically is paid for by the company, you know, the last thing you're going to do is go on and say, actually, they're really a bunch of shits and they're making huge mistakes. There's absolute turmoil in the company at the moment. God knows how we're going to survive, but you know, it isn't my fault. Sorry, right? You actually don't say that. What you say is, look, you know, the guys are great. You know, we're fantastic. You do everything you can to try to make things as right as they possibly can be, even when you know you're clutching at straws and sand is going through your hands, right? So you cannot blame the NewTek staff for what ended up happening at all, either for the last 15 years. You can blame the managers, you can blame the people higher up who were controlling those managers, and you can control the people who were leading the team, but it isn't wholly the team's fault. On one piece of defense also on Rob Powers, and I've kind of said things without really saying the whole picture with Rob. Rob loved LightWave, right? So Rob went down a path. His path was wider than he was allowed to do. So he was restricted with funding to spend it along certain things that he was going to do. And he ran out of resource to do some of the other things he needed to do, right? The things he wanted to do were things that were specific for Rob, and Rob loved, and he did those actually very well, and they're still in LightWave, and all 4 people who love that stuff use it, I'm sure. But it was a relatively limited market, right? But Rob basically was not, you know, at the time where Rob took over, they'd had runs of 2 people before who cost them huge amounts of money and had gone down the wrong path, Core being one. And by the way, it was a mistake when Core failed not to look at what was good in Core and go, okay, we screwed up, but how do we now remedy that? Looking at what's not working, but is there stuff in there we could now convert over and get it to work? You know,
But this partly, I mean, VPR was actually directly out of Core.
yeah, no, yeah. Well, I'm just saying though there was more than that, right?
Yeah,
There was interface things were actually quite good. There's lots of good stuff, but you know, it was the throw the baby out with the bathwater. I suppose the problem was it fundamentally didn't work, and it was therefore axed, right? So that wasted, you know, 2.5 years. You know, that whole path left a bitter pill. After that, of course, they got a limited resources. They also had, of course, the fight when a chunk of the NewTek of the LightWave development team left. They got all of those things had happened, and that cost them a shed load of money. And you know, one day I'll give you an indication of how much. But there's that. Then after that, they've also rebuilding NewTek itself. So a lot of resources from LightWave were going into helping fund, you know, that side. By the way, which was very successful. So, you know, again, it wasn't wasted money from NewTek. From a company point of view, the money they took out of LightWave and put into the TriCaster paid off exceptionally well for NewTek. And in fact, again, a lot of people criticize NewTek about lots of things, but the protocol that is now the industry standard for communication in the whole of the news industry worldwide is theirs, right? So, you know, that you've got to think, is that a failure? No, it's not. It was a mega success. Was LightWave, you know, the secondary feature at that point? Well, if you'd had Core, half the team walk away, and then had another disaster, why would it be your number one priority? It was bad for us, but they made the right decisions at that time for them, right? Now, okay, so that's that. So you got that period of time wasted. And I think then it takes you right back to that earlier question. What does LightWave have good now that's great? And we know what that is. And I think everybody who still uses LightWave still thinks those things are fantastic to use. So it's now a question of how fast can we get it to where we need it to go, and what's that going to take? So the first upgrade is a combination of some new features we're trying to add in, but also a case of finishing the upgrade that was planned, and some bug fixes. But obviously we're doing that from a standing start. So we're 1 month in, and in 5 months time we have to launch a release, right? So in that limited period of time, that's what we're going to get done for the first upgrade. We're beginning to start mapping out the second upgrade, so that will be the next thing to try to sort out. And the first two upgrades are relatively quick, so it's 6 months and then 6-7 months for the second upgrade. The third upgrade will be longer. The third upgrade is going to take some time, because on the third upgrade we've got some bigger things we need to actually really lay our teeth into, and if you can't get them done. So all of the bigger jobs take between 6 and 7 months to do minimum, and that's without debugging and working out if you've got it right. So you cannot get the third upgrade done without a year to get that done. So that's the reason why we did 6 months, 6 months, 1 year, right? So that's that. Well, I suppose that's probably enough on that. I suppose, yes,
I suppose you could probably do another 6 months as well, just for bug fixes and anything like that as well, or as it comes.
That will be a free up, that will just be a bug fix update, right? So we intend to try to keep the updates relatively low cost, but the bug fixes will be free. And actually we don't have the resources to do it necessarily now, but longer term, why don't we just do bug fixes every month, or when they're ready? So as we get a set of bug fixes, 10 or 15, we do a release. We just change the one that's currently downloadable and have that just constantly going out. And we never want to charge for that stuff. So we will only want to charge when we're doing something that's going to make life better for the animator, right? So again, and I said this right at the beginning, we will never do an upgrade that is not worth the money that we're charging for it. And we will, if ever we do an upgrade that's just basically a service pack update, it's time for me to go, right? So that's that core principle. It has to be, we upgrade it or just don't do it, right? So it's a bug fix other than that. But bug fixes should be constant and continual as we can. But again, when you're small, you've got resource problem. You've got maybe 10 guys programming are the same guys who debug, right? So the time they're spending programming, they're not debugging, and if they're debugging, it swings and roundabouts, both of which are important. But it's going to take us a while to get to the point where we can afford 20, 30 programmers, and at which point we'll have people constantly debugging and fixing things and tidying things up. Literally a shed load of stuff needs to be done like that, which is just going to take us time. So we don't have the ability to just put 10 million into it and not worry about the consequences. We are funding as we go, and we've got resources to pay for first upgrade, second upgrade, those sort of things, but it is relatively limited resources. So we've got to do it carefully. We've got to do it as we go. That is going to as well piss off people. I know that some people are not going to think we're moving fast enough. And also, one upgrade for one animator, which they adore, isn't what another animator wants. So you can't please everybody. So again, some of that comes down to the arrogance of as an animator myself, you've got to think, well, what would make my life easier for general day-to-day animation, what would I like to see in it as must-haves, and then what would be the things I can live with for now that will be secondary. Very difficult to answer that question. And it's
Yeah, and you also need to spread the love and try not to take on board things that you like yourself. Which, without throwing any water on Rob, I think you've got that exactly right. He was very focused, and he had a very his what is, you know, he came in as this type of animator and this type of, you know, incredibly talented that he was, and he put a lot of focus in things that he loved, but not necessarily that everybody else, you know, because there's a whole different fields of people, as you say, architecture, design, model making. You know, there's a lot of stuff could have been done that got ignored or was just not as impressive as the stuff that was going into the stuff that he loved, and that's not a diss, because what he did was some really good stuff. But it's, yeah, you've got to try and always take that step back and make sure that the whole product is going forward.
yeah.
This actually brings me into a good one of my questions here as well, which is how to actually manage expectations. And I think you sort of talked about that already a little bit.
It's you know, it's unbelievably difficult, isn't it? I think I took two. So we buy. It's a quick history of the last month, right? We bought the software, and obviously we screwed up on the website and on two areas. One is we did it very fast because we were put in a position by VizRT. We had to, and in retrospect, we could have just not done anything for a month. But then you lose the impetus of them press releasing and sending something to everybody saying we're selling it. So we didn't really think that was an option. So I'm talking about general expectations, but how these things bite you on the bum, right? So in our heart, we thought, well, we kind of have to do something as quickly as we can. So we had a week to put together a website, pricing, some T-shirts, something to show that we're meaning it, right? And we didn't have access to the actual NewTek website. So you think, okay, all right, so we're doing it from scratch. So we get it done. We actually built something in scratch. And I made I think I've said this publicly, I made a bad decision on the pricing. Joe and me and a couple of other guys were sitting around a table saying, should we do it in pounds or dollars? The system we're using, because we're UK, will be pounds, but we could run it in dollars, but it does a conversion, right? Well, what we didn't think about, what I didn't think about, was that when it does a conversion, it does a conversion two ways. So it's pounds to dollars and then back to us in pounds. And actually, at each point, you're robbing yourself. At each point, it's costing you a translation fee, right? So it's pounds to start with. That's the point, right? I thought dollars would be better for the US and Europe rather than pounds. And I thought it would be easier for everybody to understand. Let's just do it in dollars. That immediately cost us money. So whatever price we put initially as pounds, then, you know, effectively got translated down twice and ended up costing us money. Because remember, every cost you do isn't a direct, just a translation of the amount. It is they take a bit at each conversion stage as profit for themselves, right? So that's costing you. And so anyway, I got that wrong. I made a mistake. So that was a decision made in that week where we're trying to put everything together. Bang. You can't then change that overnight. And then of course you've got the problem where we had 1,000 hits in 5 minutes, and you know, or 100,000, something like it. It was a phenomenal amount of hits, whatever it was, and it crashed the system. Now I didn't know, but it's normal. So pretty much every retail company, when they set up first online, it will crash for the first often weeks, where people are gradually going on there, too many people, or it will hit all the red flags, and it's basically stopped, right? So so we do it, everybody hits it because everybody's enthusiastic, and then they hit it again because it's not gone through, then they hit it again because it's not gone through, and then they hit it again because it's not gone through. So if if 1,000 people hit it, that's 4,000 people will have probably tried in a minute. because they'll do it again and again and again if they don't get through, right? And that happened for the opening 2 or 3 minutes. We had phenomenal quantity. I did get told the amount, but it was phenomenal amount. Crashed the system. Then all of a sudden we can't take orders. So then you're trying to deal with the people, and you're sending. Of course I care, so I'm sending personal messages to people about their orders. You know, I've got a shitload of things over here I need to deal with, but I'm actually now online typing to people going, I'm so sorry, we're screwing up, and you know, and all that. So, you know, I'm dealing with all that. And then you get past that, and then we think, well, you know, that's actually just cost us not only the loss of sales, but actually the conversion we now realize is costing us, you know, every item we're making less than we planned, right? By quite a bit. So we've got that, and then so we think, well, shit, we're going to have to change that. And then, of course, we give away a share stupidly for free as a thank you to everybody, because we thought the opening mail shot was, and all we wanted was to only deal with people who are existing LightWave users, right? So we're thinking it's going to be people like you guys, you know, people who might be a bit pissed off, but they fundamentally love LightWave, right? So, you know, you guys have had such pain. What can we do to make it better for you guys? So, you know, Joe says, well, why don't we give everybody a share or more if they want it? And then we created the 3 price structure. Was based on, if you don't have much money, you get the upgrade, you get a t-shirt and a free share, right? If you've got a bit more money, or if you're a bit more money, you can spend this amount of money, you get X amount of shares, t-shirt, and you know, whatever. And then the middle one was a kind of, well, if you've had LightWave but haven't used it for many years, currently the upgrade path is you have to do this to this, and it costs you this amount. Well, let's just do a reasonable price upgrade that means that even if you've sold your LightWave but you're on the list, we know you once had it, you can get an upgrade for this amount of money, and you're suddenly back on the track. Seemed to me to fit everybody, right? But of course, then you get people saying, well, you can't just give shares away, it's going to have tax implications. Okay. And then you get, well, it's a con. Yeah, they're ripping you off. Okay, I don't know how we're doing that, but okay. And then you start trying to answer that stuff, and it cost us huge amounts of time dealing with something that was meant as a gesture of, you know, we're one of you, we care, right? And so we'll stop it next month. We're ending it. But the point about that is those are mistakes that you've made with the best intention in the world going forward. And we haven't even done an upgrade out yet. So I've had my butt kicked by, you know, I mean, unbelievably. And I cannot tell you how rude some people have been. I'm not used to it, is the first thing. And I've always tried to be as honest and straight as I can. Now, sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you say something and you got something slightly wrong, you know, whatever. But fundamentally, I'm not, you know, I want to be as honest and straight, and I care about everything I'm doing. So I try to be as open, as friendly as I possibly can be. And the problem is that you have other people who just want to be as nasty to you as possible. You know, and clearly there are some people out there who just don't want us to succeed and want to bring it down now if they can do it, right? So I didn't realize I was going to get that from this bunch of people we were pitching this at, right? Because we haven't done a public announcement. We haven't done a contact all past users. We've only done it with the main users, existing people who are still on the existing user group that VizRT did. So we thought it would be friendly, and it was super friendly, by the way, for the opening week and a half. But then, of course, the moment anything went slightly wrong, it then started getting quite difficult to handle. And bear in mind, we're not retailers and we're not programmers. And really, you know, the only reason we bought LightWave was to save it, right? If we hadn't have bought LightWave, no one else was going to buy it. So it was dead. So the irony was of this is our intention was utterly and totally about trying to do the right thing for all the people who were stuck with LightWave or would like to see LightWave come back. So it has been a little painful, but worth it. You know, we're well underway. We're doing it. But the kicking I took a couple of times, you know, wow. I mean, you know,
I guess the problem is, that there were those of us who knew what was going on, and we couldn't say, for obvious reasons, because it was like legally binding and things. You know, we just couldn't reveal what was happening in behind the scenes. But the problem with that was that, you know, it's we can't just say, hey, just trust us because you know us. No one really knew you very well. I mean, obviously, I'd met you personally, but I don't know you well. And it's very difficult for a community that doesn't know your name associated with LightWave, if you know, because you only have raised your head so far above the parapet in the past. And they don't understand the history, don't understand that what the place that this was coming from. And obviously some very cynical people out there as well. But you know, and distrustful because of what's gone in the past, which isn't your fault. Which I did find a very silly argument. I saw some of those arguments; it was very silly, but understandable. The people have been burnt in the past.
I don't mind the cynical. I don't mind some of it, because I would go on with some people and they were being negative. I would say, look, you know, let's have a chat. You come on, have a chat. Let me explain to you what I'm doing. And I did that, and they changed completely very quickly and were on board. And we're talking very friendly people, really nice people who genuinely actually care, but they were just so fed up that they just wanted to blurt it out on the first week, which was fine. And I dealt with I didn't deal with anything. I spoke with probably 10, 15 people like that, and I loved it. I had no issue with that at all. And I didn't mind, by the way, if they didn't get converted. I just wanted to try to help ease their pain and say, look, I'm not here to do anything bad. And that's the first thing. So, and then there was a couple of people who, one guy who was very abusive, who really probably didn't mean to be as abusive as he was being. He had a few drinks, and you know, and actually, I overall liked chatting to him. And I made the mistake. I lost it very early in the conversation. We were on for about 2 hours, and about 15 minutes in on the first time round, I lost it because he was being abusive. He was using language I don't like, and I decided to, you know, confront that head on, which I often do in everything, right? So I tend to go head on with things. Anyway, it was a mistake. I should not have done that, and I then apologized to him, and then we started chatting again, and it was fine. You know, that was good. The other guy was utterly different. I mean, he didn't give a damn at all. Probably didn't still use Lightwave. Had an axe to grind with everybody from Lightwave, and didn't care about, you know, there was nothing reasonable in his argument, in his discussion, in his talking at all. And those people, you know, I'm sure he'll be very good in his bedsit, you know, living without any family around him, because he sure as hell, I don't think, you know, has many people who'd want to be around him. And so there was that call. And, you know, after that one, I think I ended that one at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, that I did have to take a break after that for a few days. So, but I think going forward, that taught me a valuable lesson. There are going to be some of those, and I'm not going to be able to turn them around or convert them. So sod it. You know, if they don't want to be part of it, great. Go and buy something else. But don't waste my time. I'm here to do one thing, and that's to get Lightwave back to where it needs to be, and to update it, modify it, improve it. And of course, we're going to make mistakes, I'm sure, from time to time going through it. But that is everything that I want. My intention and my heart is to do that. And it isn't to do it with esoteric bits of programming that you're not going to use. My priority is to make it much better to use, much more fun to use, quick to use and easy to use. And by the way, you mentioned about adding stuff under the hood that would allow you much more complex access to that. Whatever it is needs to be done. It brings me on to UVs. So we need to improve that. So our UVs are at work. That's all I can say about it. Our UVs, so our
I mean,
UVs need,
Catmull Clark, just saying.
yeah,
They don't work with Catmull Clark subdivision.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, they work but break very easily.
Yeah. Well, one of the things when you're in Rhino, which is very precise, and you do a UV map in Maya, which is excellent at doing UV map control. And likewise, by the way, if you're from the games industry, your UV control need is significantly more precise than the Maya user or Rhino user. And I suppose in accuracy terms, we're probably, if we base it on Rhino and Maya is one type, Unreal is another type, and then us. We're the third in that list of accuracy, right? In gaming, you have to do significantly, ideally no gaps. Your UVs need to take up the minimal space possible, and they need to be super tight in how they're constructed and output. So I have a guy, like he's an Aaron. Anyway, Aaron basically is a genius at surfacing, texturing, and stuff across all packages. But his work in Unreal is a work of art, right? And you see what he does on the UV side. So we give him really good UVs that we think are good. No. So he nearly always has to redo them and make them tighter and better. And he just is super good at it. So we need to learn from that, look at what they do on the gaming side, because we could learn a lot from that whole industry about how to do good UV mapping. So remember, they're often UV mapping onto shit models as well. So they are trying to make that model look way better than it is.
Yeah.
And they do that through absolute beautiful texturing, right? So that's that. Then you've got
actually Modeler. It has poor UV support, but you know what it does? The number of times when you see assets that have come from outside of Lightwave and you go, "Wow, that is a terrible model," because Modeler is such a good modeler, you forget. They went, "Oh, they've done it in a really weird way," but it kind of works, but the geometry is terrible.
Modeler is really good. It's just not as good as as it could be.
It would be great if I would just had this.
Yeah. Modo is the next step on from Lightwave's modeler. If you and it really is actually the next step on from Lightwave's modeler. And they got it really right. They took all the things they wanted to improve when they left, and they got it right. It took them some time, but they made it really good. They didn't get the rest right. I mean, the animation side, that sort of side is okay, but that bit of it, they really did do a good job. We need to do that. We need to go, because in essence, they're so similar and yet so different. But there's things in there that you just need to get into Lightwave. It would make life so much easier. Actually, their UV handling is excellent in there as well. So it's a case, I think, of UVs have to be something we look at as quickly as we possibly can and improve. I don't know how long that will take, but we do need to do that and get that sorted. But if we could, I would say, you need to think at least as good as Maya and Rhino, but maybe we need to look at the Unreal as being the pinnacle of how good you can make UVs, and we need to get it, longer term to there, even if that means we have to get it to a mid stage and then further on. But yeah, that's good. That is something that should be, it's mega important to do.
Yeah, about UVs, there's actually this third-party free tool called PLG UVs or something like that, that actually has a really good package UV tool that actually does exactly what you talk about.
PLG.
PLG, yeah. And it actually does a really good job at actually packaging the UV map to sort of not have as big gaps as you normally would have,
Okay. Well, it
And
tightens them up and existing UVs.
yeah, exactly.
I
And
believe
you
it was only
you
PC
you can.
only though.
What did you say?
Sorry,
was PC only.
Yeah.
Which is why it was, yes, it was great, but it would have been very complicated if they'd say licensed it or applied it, because then they would have to then recompile it and make sure it worked with the Mac, which is often one of the big problems with LightWave, isn't it? So yeah, I'm not even sure if it was at one point just 32-bit as well, but I think there's a 64-bit version.
Yeah, there is a 64-bit version, and it actually works. Right now, it actually works with LightWave 2020 as well.
Oh yeah, I have it and occasionally use it. It doesn't fix the problems with UV.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Which is the other side of it. It's not just the packing and the repacking and the organizing and the stitching and all of those types of things that we are sorely missing. It's the UVs get broken issue that's also.
Oh yes. And you have to unweld and weld points and all that stuff. Those tricks.
Here's the thing with that though, with regards to the Mac issue. So let's deal with the Mac issue, because it's a really interesting subject. The Mac version is the prettiest version of LightWave. I always think, whenever I look at it, I always think it just looks really nice, and it scales well, and it just works really well. Obviously, we all know there's a stack of things it needs to gradually get included to get away from OpenGL or whatever the case may be. There's a stack of stuff that needs doing. So we know that. Obviously, that stuff will aim to get done. But here's the thing with it. It's had the bones broken. Don't work at all, right? I mean, they just fundamentally don't work currently, right? So, and that needs to be fixed. I'm sure we'll do that. Hopefully, get that sorted. But they have lived with that remarkably. So the chances are they're not doing much character animation, which is fine. But they've lived with that. And I'm sure if there was a plugin in the PC version that took an extra 6 months to come out for the Mac version, that's okay, as long as you tell them, right? So the Mac people generally are very forgiving. You know, they've got a lovely system, and if you spoke to them and just treated them like grown-ups, said, look, guys, we've got some plugins that we're going to be releasing, but it's going to be staggered for the Mac. So it will, you know, we're going to do this for the first release. It's going to have this, bang. But on the second release, this one will be missing on the first one, but we're going to put that on the second release, bang. But we're adding this on the second one. Now, likewise, if there's a thing that needs to be done on the Mac one or can be done on the Mac one that improves it, that can't then be done on the PC, then that's okay too, right? So, you know, if Mac has some architectural advantages that turn out to give the Mac version some advantages, why wouldn't you give that the best it can possibly be for the Mac and not worry about it? If it's, you know, you're not going to get metal on the PC as an advantage, are you? But it is going to be an advantage on the Mac. So it's kind of, you know, let's not worry about that. It's, you know, it's like the 2015 version, isn't it? It's if we have 2015 as a path, the Mac as a path, and the PC as a path, right? And there are sometimes they're not in alignment. I'm not sure that matters, as long as you're giving very good upgrades across the board generally, right? So if there's one or two functions that aren't the same in every package, it's one of the things that stops you developing. It's one of the things that hinders you. Well, don't be hindered by it, right? Let's look at the Mac and let's make the best Mac product we can possibly make. And if it falls behind on some features or goes ahead in some features, that's okay. But if that feature we've gone behind on, we still want to add that, let's find a way of doing that, or the equivalent that works really well on the Mac, right? And likewise, you know, as we go down the Linux route, if we go down that route, if we add something on there that's significantly better on there that can't be done on the PC, then okay, great. You know, that gives the Linux people a little bit of an advantage on that tool. But if it's a real-time Boolean cutting tool that we can put on all three, you put it on all three. Do you remember we had a little chat earlier on about the rendering? You know, some incompatibility. You know, it stifles you if you don't try to improve that. It doesn't matter. You know, as long as the render engine is excellent on the Mac, awesome. If we can get it to work on their GPUs, well, in fact, it's a unified chip, then awesome. Therefore, it cannot be the same as doing a PC with a dedicated NVIDIA target, right? Or on Linux, if we find out they're using mainly ATI cards, well, then that will be what we need to try to aim that version at, right? So it's about not being sort of restricted by something purely because you're trying to make everybody equal, right? You can't make everybody equal. It's impossible. You know, it's like us, right? I mean, if I was born from aristocracy and had a huge amount of money, there's not a thing that's going to make that person, that version of Andrew Bishop, understand this version of Andrew Bishop, right? Who came from a council estate, right? So you cannot, you cannot make everything equal. You just got to make the best that can possibly be for the Mac. The Mac, has an awful lot of people who are doing graphics for sort of Photoshop and whatever. If the Mac version ended up getting more compatibility with those sort of programs to make it better for those sort of users, and that was an advantage it had over the PC one, with all the PC people going, why can't we have that tool? Well, obviously you'll try to do that for them, but it might take another few months, right? Well, I don't see any problem with that. It's about making the best product we can possibly make for each area we make the product. They've just recently, I don't know, I won't say the next thing stupid. I was going to give another idea, which I had to do away, but I won't do that. But yeah, anyway, you get that. I think everybody would agree, as long as you're informing them on the way in and you talk to them about it. And I think we've been very honest about the Mac. There's a lot of people worried we didn't want to continue the Mac. There was definitely a discussion from a couple of people who were around us who said, shouldn't we just drop the Mac? And we don't want to do that. We actually love the Mac and think, well, why not just have that like 2018 or 15 or whatever it is, try to make a path that is, dedicated to the Mac longer term and build that up so it becomes its own product. I think most people will agree with that. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as you get as many feature parity as you possibly can. But I think also as well, with regards to PLG, just looping back onto that, I think it was NewTek themselves didn't like dealing with the third party. They always wanted to contain everything within themselves, and I think you guys have a much more open-minded, maybe we'll license this software and get them to expand it, or work with third-party developers or third-party content creators to make tutorials that maybe they're paid, maybe they're not. And I think that's a really good positive sign going forward. That you're much more willing to deal with the third party because they are essentially your lifeblood. They're the people who will create the cool stuff or create the demos of stuff that you just haven't got time to do because you can only do a finite amount of work, and help to push the brand and reciprocate and have backwards and forwards bouncing between the third party, which I think in the past NewTek hasn't been so willing to do.
To sort of round this off a little bit,
Sure.
What guest would you like to see on this pod?
What guest on here?
Yeah. I mean, we have lots of ideas of people that we want to interview.
Well, obviously, worth getting Elmar on, I think, and Juice. So Joe would probably be worth chatting to. There's people behind the scenes you don't yet know. So we have a design guy. He's probably worth getting on, having a chat with on the marketing side, just so you can hear his thoughts on marketing for LightWave longer term or those sort of things. Some of the programmers are monosyllabic, so you probably don't want to put them on. They'll be very short interviews.
Yeah. Do you have like artists that you would like to, or content creators that you would like to see as well?
John Allardyce.
Okay.
I've heard of him.
So John just did shed loads of shots for the last Top Gun Maverick film.
Ah.
So all the animatics for that were done in LightWave, and quite a few of the finished shots were done in LightWave. So he'd be worth having a chat to.
Oh yeah, cool.
That'd be really cool.
I would say. So where's the Jet? Yeah, Jet Cooper. So he is amazing. So I would. I mean, basically, if you had a look on the gallery, Jet Cooper's up. His name's up there. Tony Hall, I think, chats to him and on a regular basis, and quite a few of these people who are on there. But some of those guys who are on there would be worth chatting to. There's one of the guys does unbelievable character stuff, facial stuff. He's a genuine artist, and so I'll get a few more names. But I mean, Jet Cooper would be good. Tony Hall would be worth talking to.
Yeah.
He's one of the educational guys.
Yes.
Would be worth
that's
chatting
the guy.
to.
That's the guy behind LightWave Salvation, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, him, he has, he could have moved on easily onto other systems.
Yeah.
I suppose we all could have, but he has remained steadfast all the way through, and he really is a very, very good educator. Does a fantastic show once a year, which is always invites someone down from the industry or a couple of people from the industry to talk. And he's just a good guy, and I would get him. I'd get him on definitely. Simon Coombs, so he's one of the top render anglers in LA, and Simon Coombs is an old modeling guy in LightWave, still uses LightWave today. All right, guys, listen, big hug. So see you tomorrow when we do it again. No. See you later.
See you guys. Great to chat to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So, what a guest. Thank you so much, Andrew Bishop, for taking your time. But now you have reached the end of this very first episode. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and please share it with your friends if you liked it. If you want to get in contact with us, please read in the description below. We have an email address there. It's lightwavedigest@gmail.com. Because we're actually looking for more people to help out with this initiative. Until next time, have a nice and wonderful LightWave experience.